Tuesday. Well, this week, the last Republican nominee, Mitt Romney, launched a brutal attack on this year's frontrunner, Donald Trump. He joins me now live from San Diego. And Governor, welcome back.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you.
In the interest of equal time, you heard that Rush Limbaugh had a lot to say about you. What do you want to say back?
Well, I always enjoy listening to Rush Limbaugh. I often agree with him. Sometimes I disagree with him. But I think we can all agree that this is a very important election. We don't want to see Hillary Clinton become the president of the United States. And I think the great majority of Republicans, mainstream Republicans from across the country, don't want to see Donald Trump as the president of the United States either. They're concerned that they'd see a recession. And I think they're also concerned we'd see a more dangerous world.
Well, here's the criticism that I heard from some people, and I guess that would include Rush Limbaugh, about your speech. You certainly have a right, you know, the First Amendment is there, to criticize Donald Trump and say why he'd be a bad president. But some people say that your speech was, their words, condescending, even undemocratic, in the sense that, in effect, you're saying folks who are voting for Trump don't know what they're doing.
No, I think folks need to understand the whole background of Donald Trump. I find from time to time, I talk to people about the campaign, and they say, gosh, I didn't know that Donald Trump gave a bunch of money to Jimmy Carter and to Hillary Clinton and to Harry Reid and to John Kerry. They hear that from Donald Trump that he's such an extraordinary success. They didn't know about Trump Airlines and Trump Mortgages and Trump Vitamin Network and Trump Steaks and Trump Taj Mahal. They didn't realize that a lot of small people have been crushed by Donald Trump's rise to become a very wealthy man, successful financially. But this is a guy who has not been a uniform success. And as they learn about him, a lot of them say, you know, I want to make sure that I take a closer look at the other guys in the race.
How about the argument, and again, we heard this from Rush, this is the establishment basically trying to maintain control of a guy and push back a guy that they wouldn't be able to control?
Well, you can't control Ted Cruz, for instance. No one has suggested you could do that. And Marco Rubio, everybody tried to stop Marco Rubio from going against a sitting Republican governor in Florida. He did it anyway and won. Establishment suggests that there must be some Wizard of Oz somewhere pulling the strings. That's not the way it works. There are individuals like myself. I sat there and watched Donald Trump, and I said, look, someone's got to say something. I didn't talk to anybody and say, I'm going to do a speech. You got some ideas? This is something I did on my own because I care very deeply about the country. I love America. I'm concerned about America, and I believe the heart and soul of conservatives and Republicans recognize that the principles that Donald Trump is talking about have nothing to do with conservatism, nothing to do with keeping America strong.
Do you see any connection between your speech and the fact that Trump, who was expected to win all 4 contests yesterday, ended up losing 2 of them to Ted Cruz?
Well, it was a big night for Ted Cruz last night, as you know, and I think that's overwhelmingly because people are taking a closer and closer look at Donald Trump. I think the best look they got was at that last debate. I think Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio prosecuted their case very effectively. Donald doesn't have some great answers. When they talked, for instance, about immigration and releasing those tapes from the New York Times, we began talking about flexibility and immigration. Flexibility. Oh, that's pretty clearly saying that what he said to the New York Times is very different than what he's saying to the American people. He is not the real deal. He is a phony. You know, he talks about how he's not going to be controlled by the moneyed interest. Do people understand that he's not giving money to his campaign? He's loaning it because he's expected to get money back from those same big donors he decries right now. He's planning on running a general election based upon raising money from those very people. Look, he's not the real deal, and I think Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio made that very clear, and that's why you saw the kind of night that happened last night.
Well, you took down Donald Trump pretty hard this week. You had a very different view of him 4 years ago when he endorsed you. Take a look.
There are some things that you just can't imagine happening in your life. This is one of them. Being in Donald Trump's magnificent hotel and having his endorsement is a delight. Donald Trump has shown an extraordinary ability to understand how our economy works, to create jobs for the American people.
Governor, what changed?
Oh, let me tell you, this is a guy, if we look at the past, this is a guy who was very successful, made a lot of money for himself. But at the same time, take a very close look and look how many small people he crushed along the way and how many failures he had. And so we could talk about the past at great length. I had a lot of people who endorsed me who I wouldn't endorse for president. Donald Trump just happens to be one of those who endorsed me. I do not want to see as president of the United States. And there's a long list of those who are endorsers. 61 million people voted for me. I don't think all 61 million people ought to be president of the United States.
But you were talking at the time about his extraordinary ability to create jobs, his understanding of the economy. I mean, it's not like everything that Donald Trump, that you believe he did wrong, has happened in the last 4 years. A lot of those business failures that you talk about happened before 2012. Before 2012, he was making the birther argument that President Obama needed to show his birth certificate because he wasn't born in the United States. I guess part of the question is, by legitimizing him back then, were you part of the reason he's where he is now?
Let's talk about what hasn't happened, or didn't happen back then, and what has happened during this campaign. Calling George W. Bush a liar, cozying up to Vladimir Putin and saying he's a strong leader and popular with his people, equivocating on the Ku Klux Klan, talking about all Muslims as if they're one monolithic group. This is a person who considered Mexican immigrants rapists. And then his policy positions, one after the other. These are positions which are totally inappropriate. He doesn't want to balance the budget. He wants to, as you saw the other night, $10 trillion of additional debt. Look, this is a guy who doesn't represent what's right for the future of the Republican Party.
In your speech this week, you suggested that the other three candidates should, in effect, work together to try to stop Trump. Vote for Kasich in Ohio, vote for Rubio in Florida. Basically a stop Trump, flood the field, but that isn't working that way. Kasich rejected it, as you know, in the debate. We now hear that Cruz is actually actively campaigning against Rubio in Florida to try to, even if it means Trump wins, to try to drive Rubio out of the race. Are they making a mistake?
Oh, I think they each run their campaign in the way they think is most appropriate for them and most likely to lead to them to become the nominee. So I'm not going to tell them how to run their campaigns. I think people in Ohio are likely to get behind John Kasich, their popular governor there. And if I were a resident of Ohio, that's who I'd vote for. And in Florida, I think a lot of people look at Marco Rubio, are very impressed with his track record, what he's done in that state. They're probably going to get behind him. I think he's going to win in Florida. We'll see. It's close. In the final analysis, I think you're going to see one of the three. And right now, it looks like Ted Cruz, which will emerge as the strongest contender. But, you know, that can change. We've seen a lot of surprises in this campaign. One of those three I'm going to endorse before the convention. And I'm sure hopeful that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure one of those three is our nominee.
There is some speculation that when you call for a contested convention, that you are opening the door for a scenario in which the party would end up turning to you. Here's how you answered that question this week.
There are no circumstances I can foresee where that would possibly happen. But let me say something else.
I can foresee.
No reasonable scenario I can imagine.
Just slam the door on it. Close the door. Unambiguous. You will not run for president.
I'm not running for president, and I won't run for president.
Okay, this is the kind of thing. The question I'm going to ask you now is why people hate reporters. You say you won't run for president, but you didn't rule out a draft. So here's an opportunity.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, I know, but
okay, Chris, it's just so ridiculous. I'm not going there. You got three people who I'd like to see as a nominee. I'm going to endorse one of them. I'm going to campaign with one of them. I'm not running for president. I'm not planning on running for president. And that's what it's all about. You got four people running for president at this stage. One of them will be our nominee.
And as General George Tecumseh Sherman said, if nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve.
Well, that's an absurd, in my opinion, that's an absurd thing to say. No Republican should say that. That makes absolutely no sense for someone to say if they were drafted by their country that they'd say no. But what I can tell you is I'm not running for president. I'm not going to run for president. I'm going to support one of these four people to be our nominee. I'm supporting three of them right now, and that means that we're going to get one of those people as our nominee.
You realize that by saying what you just said, that people are going to say, oh, he opened the door to a draft.
No, you know how absurd that is? We've got four very strong people who are running for president. They will be our nominee. And I'll tell you, Chris, there's absolute 100% certainty of that in my view.
All right. Finally, despite saying that they all thought that he was unqualified to be president, all three of the candidates on that stage on Thursday night also said that if Trump's the nominee, they will support him. You say you won't. Do you think, one, it's a mistake for those guys to say they'll support him even if he's the nominee? And what are your plans if he's the nominee? Would you support a third-party candidacy?
Well, I think the guys would ask that question remembered the fact that at the beginning of the campaign, they all committed to support the nominee. They didn't imagine it might be Donald Trump, perhaps, and at the debate, it looked like they were having a hard time getting those words out. But they honored the pledge that they made at the very beginning. In terms of my own plans, I anticipate supporting one of the three, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, or John Kasich as our nominee. If they don't become the nominee, then I'm probably going to go to the voting booth and find someone else who's running as a conservative, or perhaps just write in the name of someone who I believe should become the president of the United States, who I can be proud of, and who I believe is interested in balancing the budget, keeping America safe with a strong military, and who's not willing to disparage fellow Americans, Mexican Americans, Muslims, and so forth.
Governor, thank you. Thanks for talking with us today. It's always good to talk to you, sir.
Thanks so much, Chris. Good to be with you.